And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Me and Ryan back to recap episode 9 of Survivor season 44. Happy to be here, Ryan. What is going on with you?
Dylan, I'm doing great. We're here, obviously, because we chose to compete. We chose to podcast. We're not ones who are going to sit out, even if we get more food. But no, happy to be here too.
Yeah. Look, I can't wait to get into the whole rice thing, but I have my thoughts. But yeah. So look, another episode. Kane goes home at final 10 here. Or final 9, I should say. He goes home with final 9, 10 votes. So we could talk about that. It was a 5-3-1-1 vote with Carolyn, Carson, Danny, Heidi, and Jam Jam voting for Kane. 3 votes on Heidi, which were Jamie twice because she was given the extra vote from Lauren, and Lauren also voted for Heidi. And then we had 1 vote on Jamie from Franny and 1 vote for Danny from Kane. What are your thoughts on everything that went down here? Was it the right move to vote out Kane?
Yeah, so obviously love a good complex vote. I would say it's close to plurality. It's not technically, since it was 5 out of 9, but close enough where we have votes going in different directions. We always love to see it. No, I thought it was a good move from the Ticas. The Ticas are still riding the middle, although granted their spot is becoming a bit exposed now. I think it's the right move for them to still stick with Soka and vote against Ratu because of the extra ammunition Ratu had with Lauren's extra vote. And granted, Jamie thought it was fake, but they didn't know that. They thought it was real. And also because I think, when you do the pendulum strategy and you are in the middle going back and forth, to immediately flip right back, especially in a war like this, can really set yourselves up for, both sides to just vote out the middle. So I think the Ticas, rather, Carolyn, Carson, Jam, I think they were wise to stick with Soka's and get rid of Ratu, because I feel like now next week they hopefully should still be in a good spot where Ratu's going to want to maybe take a shot at Danny or Heidi now. So I think it was the right move for Ticas. Obviously, it's a big blow to Lauren and Jamie losing their ally Kane. The extra vote didn't matter, and the idol, which was fake. But yeah, that's what I think about it. What about you?
Yeah, I think it was the right move. I think it was the right move for Tika, right? You get Kane out of the game, who I think everyone kind of perceived as a big threat, even though we maybe didn't get to see it. It seems like I saw a lot of people pointing out on Twitter that it looked like he was kind of in with like a lot of different people, had pretty good relationships with everyone. Like his social game may have been better than we may have been exposed to. So I think everyone kind of feared that. It was a good move from Soka to get the Ratu down to 2 now, but clearly we're being foreshadowed that Soka is very well aware, or at least Franny is now very well aware, that Tika is playing the middle and the Tika 3 are becoming a big threat. Obviously, we've known they're a big threat basically since the merge or even before that, but now the rest of the cast seems to be figuring it out. Mm-hmm. So to me, if we look forward here to episode 10, I'm thinking that we're going to get, I'm thinking that Jamie and Lauren are probably safe for at least a vote or 2 here. And I think we're going to get all the attention turned towards whether or not Ratu, wants to go with Soka. We see in the preview that maybe they may end up teaming up a little bit here. I think we're going to see kind of Ratu go to the middle now because they're down in the numbers and it's like a 3-3-2. So I think we're going to see Ratu be the 2 swing votes and decide whether they want to take a shot at a Tika member or a Soka member. Based on the dominance we've seen from Tika, I'm going to guess that they end up taking a shot at a Soka member, but I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like that was the big thing of the episode as well, other than where is Tika going to swing. It was really that conversation between Franny and Danny, where Franny says, I know we're in a war with Ratu. They took out Matt. We took out Brandon. We're going to go for Kane tonight. But are we ignoring Tika? Carolyn, Carson, and Jam Jam are clearly in the middle. They don't seem to be that threatening, but they are in a very powerful spot. And if we get Kane out tonight, what stops? I mean, she didn't say this, but I'm kind of extrapolating. Like, what stops them from next vote going over to Lauren and Jamie saying, now we have 5. Let's take out Franny, Danny, and Heidi, because even if they split their votes, then 3 and 2, then the former Sokas can't stop them at that point. So Franny's thinking that way. Now Danny is kind of taking the stance of, well, come on, they have an extra vote. They're much more threatening with Kane. I'm not scared of Carolyn. I'm not scared of Jam Jam, but I think Franny's right. I think Franny was right to be scared of the middle. I mean, Rob Cesternino famously, coined or implemented the strategy back in the Amazon about taking out the swing vote in some cases. So I definitely feel like Franny's vision here is going to prove out to be correct. And I think next week, I would not be surprised if once again, Franny wants to take a shot at Tika. But I also don't, I can't blame Danny, because technically Franny knows something he doesn't. She knows they've had conversations about taking Danny out before the whole split, before the whole Matt vote, where it was like, split the group into 2. So she has more information than him. She knows, like, they're in the middle. They wanted to take a shot at you, Danny. Danny doesn't really know that. So she's operating with more info, but I think Franny's going to end up being correct here.
Yeah. So how do I describe this? I would say it was the right move to get rid of Kane, because you flush what was a perceived idol, which gets played out, which gets voted out of the game because the whole knowledge with power fear, which, by the way, I texted my brother immediately when I was watching this. I said, get out of here with these people fearing knowledge is power. Like, this is Survivor's fault. Stop putting knowledge power into the game, and you will get people who are actually not afraid to give away their advantages, because I don't want in the future everybody to start fearing knowledge is power and start throwing advantages in different directions, which that's a whole nother, we could have a whole podcast episode on that. So I'm not going to get too much into it, but bottom line is you flush what was a perceived idol and you forced Ratu to use the extra vote. If you were to vote out a Tika member here, right, and do kind of what Franny wanted to do, then I think the issue is that Lauren can literally turn around next vote and use the extra vote, and then it's they're going to end up having enough votes to get out one of the Sokas. So I think that they had to whittle down Ratu to 2, and they needed to get the advantages out of the game, or the one advantage, I should say, the one real advantage. They needed to get that extra vote out of the game, and now they could potentially turn their attention to Tika. I'm wondering here, Ryan, who do you think, if this ends up being a real plan and Tika ends up, being a target here, who from Tika do you think is the most vulnerable?
Well, I've said before on the podcast that once someone's name comes up, it's very easy for it to come up again. It's just how it is on the island, where if a name is circulated, that's a name that keeps perpetuating. And I feel like the answer would be Jam Jam, because Carson's name has not been written down once. And I don't think people, like, as we saw again tonight, people just aren't, a few nights ago, people aren't taking Carolyn super seriously. Granted, I feel like eventually people might catch on to that she's kind of hamming up, what she's doing, and she's way more aware than people think. But I do feel like Jam, his name came up the last few times. And like he said tonight, mafia boss style, like Jay says, you throw my name out there, you brought my name down, you're going to go home. Josh did it, Matt did it, Brandon did it, and now Kane did it. And they all went out 4 in a row. So Lauren could go home next week because she wrote down Jam's name once. It also could be a situation where Franny might get targeted here. But no, I think Jam Jam's the most likely person if Tika gets targeted. Carson, ironically, I think Carson, like we said, is in the best position. So it should be Carson if they want to take a big blow to Tika, because Carson's also a big piece of glue between Carolyn and Jam Jam as well. But I feel like people just aren't still seeing him yet as a threat. His name hasn't come up once. So I feel like the answer to answer your question, Dylan, I think it will be Jam if they target Tika, but it should be Carson.
I think I agree with that. Well, I don't know if I agree that it should be Carson. I see both sides of getting rid of Carson or Jam Jam. I honestly think either one is fine. I think that because we haven't heard Carson's name come up, I'm going to assume that Jam Jam is the more obvious vote. And we heard Jam Jam's name come up, this week as potential vote out. I'm at the point with Carolyn where, and again, we mentioned that we may get to this point. I think I would be I would be shocked if she doesn't get to the final 3 at this point. Like we're thinking to ourselves, we're at the final 8, right? Still, everybody seems to like her. We got confessionals from several different people saying, I love being around her, and nobody seems to think that she's any threatening at all, any kind of threat. She goes out first in pretty much every single immunity challenge. So that there's a reason that maybe maybe it is okay to, leave her in as long as all the way till the final 5 and there's no issue, even if they plan on eventually getting rid of her. Like there's no rush to do it. But I don't see anyone kind of realizing, that maybe Carolyn does have the story. Maybe Carolyn has been playing the whole time. We're not seeing that. And she has an idol. Like I feel like very confident she gets to the final 3. Plus if you're out there playing the game, you got to put yourself in their shoes, right? They're not seeing a lot of the things that Carolyn's doing. Nobody even knows Carolyn has the idol. Like people don't see these things right now that we see. So, if I'm out there and, Danny is already had a great idol play, he's clearly a bigger threat to go home. You already know that Lauren had the extra votes. So in your mind, you're probably saying to yourself, all right, well, Lauren could be pretty threatening. Maybe she has another advantage. Then you're thinking, well, Jamie had an idol. She could be finding idols. Like you're just not mentally going to Carolyn. Heidi, right. Who knows if people will eventually find out if she has an idol. So I think mentally, if you're out there, you're not thinking about Carolyn. You're not. And that's just the reality right now. And I would be surprised if she does not make it to the final 3. So back to, our original debate and conversation here. Yeah. If Atika were to be targeted, I do not think it would be Carolyn. I think it would be Jam Jam with Carson second, Carolyn third.
And as an aside, for anybody that follows the secret scenes, and if people don't know what those secret scenes are, obviously they don't have time to show every single clip in the hour show. So they sometimes throw an extra minute or 2 on YouTube of secret scenes that didn't make it into the episode. And Dylan, half the time I critique them because I feel like half the secret scenes should be in the episodes, but I digress. This is why we need 90-minute episodes. There's a scene, if anyone hasn't seen it, you got to go watch it, where Carolyn leaves her shorts too close to the fire and she burns her shorts. And I feel like that just adds to this narrative that no one's taking her seriously. They see Carolyn as kind of a wacky, eccentric character, even though she's way more than that. The only way, Dylan, I see her getting voted out before the final 3, like we were just saying, is if there's some type of like unforced error. Like if the game continues as it does, I don't know why people would target Carolyn. They're going to target former Soka as a threat, or Carson or Jam Jam. I just feel like, or even Lauren from the extra vote situation. I don't see why somebody would target Carolyn here. The only reason I could see it happening is if there's an unforced error. And what I mean by that is like Carolyn and Jam Jam get into another fight. Jam Jam's like, you know what? I'm sick of fighting with Carolyn. She doesn't want to listen to me. I'm correct. I want to take a shot at Carolyn now. Or, Carolyn and Jam Jam vote opposite again. And then Carson has to like pick a side between Carolyn and Jam Jam. That's the only way I see this happening if Tika starts to like squabble and kind of compress on each other. Other than that, and then like if they just stay the course, they'll be fine. But other than that, I don't see how she's still not set up pretty well.
Yeah, she seems to be set up great. And again, we, speaking of Carolyn, like we got really her backstory in this episode, and that was a cool moment, I thought. It was not only like I thought it just, we kind of all knew like her story just from like reading the pregame press and stuff. But this was like the most we kind of saw of it. So like that moment at camp was great. And I thought that like the 5 minutes where like she, we were seeing why she's underestimated, like her full story, how everyone likes being around her. I thought that was an awesome moment. And I know a lot of other people really like that moment as well.
Can I say 2 things about that? Number one, great moments. Obviously I love that they had the day off. If people don't know, just in terms of how fast this game is going, I think Josh got voted out on day 14. Matt got voted out on like day 15 and Brandon 16. So they had 3 votes 3 days in a row, and they finally had an off day before I think day 17 or 18, whenever Kane went home. But the point though is that I love that we had a day off. They got to talk. We got to learn more about these individuals, see them bond at camp, maybe form social connections. I think that's really great for the show. And I think the Carolyn moment was really great. Obviously could be a great, winner showcase for her. It's a really great story. She's really, thank you, Josh, 13. So it's 13, 14, 15 instead. But it was great. Dylan, what blew my mind though, other than it being a great story for Carolyn, and she's an amazing character, I cannot believe after the whole Matthew incident they let them climb up on a rock. Now, granted, it wasn't the same rock. It was a lot more flat. It wasn't as like steep. For the life of me, Dylan, can you tell me why they would allow this? Like, I know Jeff and some other survivors are like, it's an adventure. I'm not going to stop them from going out there. They're going to live their show. It's fine. But it's almost like, like sports or even like a law. Like once something happens, you have to kind of react to that like a precedent. Like if someone gets medevaced because they climbed up a rock, why are they letting them climb up a rock again? Dylan, you do realize if Carolyn or Jam Jam fell off the rock and got medevaced, everybody would stop watching.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised at that. Also, I saw so many people. Once you said that, I knew exactly what you're going to say. Yeah, so many people talking about it. that was pretty funny. That they purposely like added that 1 second of them on the rock in there. I was like, oh no. But yeah. That
if Carolyn gets if either of them get medevaced, like half the audience is going to stop watching.
Crazy. We'll see if they make adjustments. We'll see if we in season 45 if we see anybody climbing up rocks if they decide to make the adjustment or not.
Yeah.
All right. One thing that I mentioned briefly, but we didn't completely get into yet. I feel bad saying this because I don't want to make it seem like that I like don't like Heidi or anything. But we got like the most like interesting idol search ever, and then Heidi finds it. Out of like everybody there, you're like, is Danny gonna find it? Is whoever else was looking for it? Is Carolyn gonna? I thought that out of nowhere, if it was gonna be like a random person finding it, because we didn't see like Carolyn at all in that scene. I thought we were gonna get like a Carolyn moment where she just like falls down somewhere and like she just like stumbles on the idol, like and like finds it out of nowhere. The fact that Heidi found it, I think, and again, I could potentially blame Survivor editing for this, but I think a lot of people, we've seen not a lot of Heidi this season. You would agree with that, right? We've seen, the fact that we've seen that she's in a good spot. We haven't seen a ton of confessionals. So for me, her finding the idol was like I wanted like Danny to find it. I wanted Franny to find it. I wanted somebody that we had seen a lot to find the idol because it would add for the story. And then Heidi found it. And I was like, But anyway, all that being said, more Survivor's fault for not showcasing her more. That being said, really good job on her to find the idol. I would think she's in a good spot, but also she seems to be a huge target. So I'm like, she gets votes here. She seems to be really close to Danny. And like, if Danny's a big target, then she could be a big target. So look, I don't really know what to think of Heidi, honestly, but I will give her props for finding the idol when the edit certainly made it seem like she was not going to find it.
So I think it's an interesting case with Heidi. I feel like Heidi, like we were saying, is obviously somebody who knows the game. I think she has more to offer than what the show has showed. I do feel bad that she hasn't got much of an edit pre-merge because Soka kept winning. She was pretty quiet in the edit. Although I do think since the merge, ever since she got the control vote, and then now that she's gotten an idol, she's gotten more airtime. And I do think we're going to see Heidi more as a character, and I do think she has more to offer. In terms of like what her character arc has been like, it almost feels like Heidi is always in a spot where she has potential to make an impact on the game. And it comes down to whether she makes the right decision or whether she makes a decision and it doesn't end up benefiting her and her allies. So an example would be in the pre-merge, we only saw her really at the Claire vote when Claire was like, Heidi, Matt and Franny will save me if you just vote with them. And Heidi was like, I want to save you, but I'm loyal to Danny. Danny wants you gone. I got to see what I want to do. She takes out Claire, and obviously she was in a great spot at Soka with Danny. Then we see last week or 2 weeks ago with the control vote, she has an opportunity to hopefully save Matt. Matt was kind of screwed anyway, but she had that kind of maneuverability there. And I feel like once again, now in this 3-3-2 split that we're at Final 8 with an idol that she hasn't told anybody about yet, we could see this happening next week, Dylan. We could see a situation where, like you just said, people may want to target Heidi because she's an ally of Danny and she could save herself with the idol if Danny's immune. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, Danny is vulnerable next week and she has an idol and she could save Danny like Danny saved Franny, but Heidi maybe plays an individual game and says, you know what? Maybe for my game, we're seen as a pair. Maybe best for me to let Danny go here and I'm less of a threat. So that's what I'm just saying, where we haven't seen a lot of Heidi yet, but I think she has the potential to see more of her, where it's like she's always in a spot, I feel like, where she can impact. I mean, you see what I'm saying in some ways, like where she can impact the game with different decisions.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. Right, like she seems to be having like one or two more moves coming. I think I understand. Like she's in the center of everything. It almost seems like she's been in the center of several different moves.
Like she's not in the center of the edits, but like she, I feel like, is in the center of some different things that are happening.
Which is why I'm being somewhat critical of Survivor here. Is like somebody who's, I would hope that somebody who's had that much of an impact on different votes would have, we'd get to know her better, but not gonna complain about the editing today. But anyway, I want to get to the immunity challenge, where we had the classic rice dilemma. Look, I don't know why Survivor thinks this is so interesting. Personally, I would rather just see everybody compete in immunity challenge. How about that for a concept? But classic, you could give up your rice. Yeah, you could give up your spot at immunity for rice for the tribe. They need to get 4. I really thought they weren't going to do it. I was like, yes. I was like, this is the season that breaks it. This is the season that says, no, we're all competing. And it's so funny because like Danny was that person. He was me in the game. He was like, I can never imagine myself giving up my spot in immunity for rice. And obviously Danny needed to compete for several reasons this episode, but like, he's like, I can't imagine myself. I told myself I would never do it. And yeah, I'm not doing it. And the fact that he was trying to convince everybody to be like, yes, we're going to be the season that said that, doesn't back down and says, nope, we're not doing it. I thought that was unbelievably funny because I'm literally sitting there from, my bed watching the episode. And I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. I want to see everybody compete. So I thought that part of it was funny, but yeah, I've never been a fan of the rice thing and I will continue to not be, but I just wanted to highlight Danny, kind of echoing my thoughts in the middle of the episode.
You felt so validated that Danny was the voice of Dylan on the show. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, look, it was the rice negotiation has kind of run its course. I think people are kind of tired of it. I think Jeff loves it. And I feel like Jeff, not to sound critical, I feel like Jeff has kind of lost the plots. He's kind of out of tune of what the fans or the core fans want to see from the show. It was fun and interesting in Cambodia when they were extremely low on rice and they did the negotiation there. It was really fun to see Angelina do the negotiation, David versus Goliath. And then when Jeff wanted to try it in 41, fine. Like with the new era, Dylan, seeing the same thing 4 times in a row, you get kind of, the taste gets kind of stale. I feel like we don't need it anymore. Danny's completely right. I feel like, why do we need to see this? Also strategically, I know people have to sit out, but it is way better for your game if you compete. Because not only do you get to compete for immunity, if people sit out, your odds of winning get dramatically better and you get more food and you didn't have to sit out. So it makes no sense to sit out unless you look at that challenge. Like, for example, I have very bad balance. I know I'm not going to win that challenge anyway. So if you know you're not going to win, fine. But like all other instances, you should be competing. What I want to see, if Jeff wants to see like a negotiation or he wants to see something interesting with food, just bring back what they used to do. Here's a black rock. Here's a white rock. If you want to play, show me the black rock. If you want to sit and you want to eat, show me the white rock and just do that, because then we get situations, you want fun TV. We get a situation where somebody gives up their shot at immunity because I don't need immunity tonight. I'm safe. And they go home. Like the classic John Fincher and Samoa, where he's like, I'm not going to get voted out because I didn't give people apple pie, and then he gets voted out. So it's like, that gives us plenty of good moments, Jeff. We don't need to do a negotiation. Just do the classic eat or compete. That's all we need.
Yeah. And I think the other part of it, that was a kind of classic challenge. We've seen that quite a few times, or at least a variation of it. Yeah. At least a variation of it. And it was pouring rain. I was like, yes. I was like, this is what we want to see in challenges. Torrential rain, balance challenge. And then like half the people left are sitting out. I'm like, oh, come on.
I'm pretty sure, Dylan, when it was just Franny and Danny left, I think Jeff's like, we just passed the 5 or 10 minute mark. I'm like, oh my God.
Based on the people that sat out, I know it's written down here. Carson sits out, Lauren sits out, Kane sits out, and Heidi sits out. I mean, I don't know how any of them would have done in this, but based on who was competing, I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody watching it was like, well, it's going to be Danny versus Franny, because those have been the two challenge beasts this season. But yeah, just in, I like that challenge a lot. And the fact that it was in the rain made it cooler. It was just like, I would rather not see only 5 people do it, at the final 9.
Yeah. I guess what I just don't understand, honestly, and granted, this is Jeff's whole thing now. In the new era, you have to earn it. It's got to be super hard. You have to earn your food. Nothing comes given to you. I just feel like, what does the show get out of it by not giving people food? Like, I feel like Jeff thinks that we want to see people overcome. Ever since Edge of Extinction, I think Jeff thinks the audience wants to see you have to go to your deepest level. You have to fight. You have to see what you're really made of. But we just want to see the complex relationships, the game, the strategy, the people interacting, the social bonds. We just want to see that, because Dylan, I guarantee you, if people had, even with the rain, if people had like food in their bellies, this could have maybe lasted like an hour. We're no longer going to have the challenges where Parvati goes 5 hours, like where Christian Hubicki goes 6 hours. We're never going to get those ever again, because people are so depleted that these endurances are lasting 30 minutes at most. Like, even the Australian Survivor Final Four challenge endurance lasted 5.5 hours. Like, we're no longer going to get these moments because people have no strength to go more than 30 minutes in an endurance, despite the rain.
And let's keep in mind that when you're having 3 vote outs in 3 days, you don't have time to do 5 or 6 hour challenges. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I mean, again, we could do a whole postseason podcast on like things that need to change or things that need to go back. And in my opinion, this should be on the list, because the challenge, like, and I don't know, maybe it was just a better challenge cast. I really enjoyed the challenges last season. I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, if we've had any repeat. We kind of had the repeat with the net, the spider net thing that kind of, yeah, that was a repeat one, but it was like different at the end. But that, in my opinion, was the best challenge, because it was like, a while of people standing on the perch at the end. And in last season, it was Gabler, really, really like setting the record for most minutes holding up whatever that was. So it's like, those, in my opinion, are like the best challenges. And I hope that we get back to longer challenges eventually, because like, I love seeing, I don't want to see a 5 to 10 minute challenge, So
yeah,
I always, as a kid, when I used to watch Survivor as a kid, I always used to get excited when they would show like the elapsed time on the bottom. Yeah. And it would be like 3 hours. And I'm like, how could you stand up there for 3 hours? I can't even fathom that. So like, I would love to get back to that,
But you're right, because as a kid, I was always impressed, because I'm like, they're doing this for 3 hours on no sleep and no food. I'm on sleep and food, and I couldn't do that for 20 minutes. So It's like, I was always very impressed. Now, granted, like you said, we do have exceptions. Like, obviously last season, Owen and Carla went 2.5 hours or whatever in the water with the tide. Granted, that's a little bit different than being, out there in the blazing sun or whatever. But I mean, I think people would want to see that. I mean, if Jeff wants to see us react to people going beyond their limits, give them food and have them go 5 hours just by holding their hand above their head. Like, that's always fun to watch. The last thing I'll say about the negotiation, Dylan, was that it was so funny to me how Danny, not only was Danny like, we got to compete, guys. Wasn't Lauren also saying, guys, we have to compete? And then she was the second person to say, I'll sit out for the rice or something.
Yeah, I don't know. My brother brought up a good point. He said that Heidi was the one like talking to Jeff, like, oh, I don't know if we're going to get to 4 to sit out. And then like, she was like asking people to sit out, but she wasn't sitting out. And it took her all the way till the end for her to volunteer. So I thought that was kind of interesting. She was like trying to get other people to sit out, but she didn't want to sit out until they only had 3. So I thought that was just another interesting aspect.
It's also not it's a negotiation by definition, by the way, is where 2 sides have their numbers or their goals in mind. And then obviously there's different forms of negotiation, but the most basic one is you meet in the middle, or you come to a agreement that benefits both parties. It's not negotiation if Jeff says, I want 4 to sit out, and then you have to meet that number. That's not negotiation. You're just meeting Jeff's demands. If you really want to negotiate, you say to Jeff, we're not going to sit out 4, but we'll sit out 3. And then you go from there. Or production wants people to sit out. You just do what Danny did and say, we're not going to sit out. And maybe Jeff will say, fine, I'll take 2. Like back in the day, and Angelina made a joke on Twitter. Angelina's like, if I was there, I would have gotten Jeff to have one person sit out, and that's it. Like,
right.
You can't just give in to Jeff's demands. You got to make him work for it.
Yes. All right, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to go over. Oh, I think that the most crazy thing about maybe this entire episode, and we went through most of it, but one of the crazier things about this episode is that after the episode, all we have left in the game is two idols.
That's it.
Carolyn and Heidi. There's no fake idols remaining. So and I think I saw a tweet from Steven Fishback. He said the most disappointing part of this episode was that Jamie's fake idol was played up so much, all to just go out of the game by giving it to Kane because of fear of knowledge is power.
I don't want to sound mean.
I preached on this podcast. I said, this is going to be unbelievable when she plays the fake idol, when she goes home because of it. And then now she's left in the game, no fake idol. And it just went out of the game without anybody even knowing it was fake.
I don't want to be mean. Then what was the whole point of Jamie's edits? I don't want to sound rude because I'm sure Jamie's was great. Her whole story for without having to get too much into the edit, the whole story for Jamie was, I'm important. I have an idol. I'm the most valuable person on this camp. The editors even gave her the massive troll job by giving her like the name. I have an idol. I'm good. And then they flash up the fake idol. They played her so good there. And and like you said, we were waiting for weeks now, Dylan, that she's going to play the fake idol on herself or on Lauren or Kane to save them. And then Jeff goes, this is not an idol, and just throws it in the fire. It goes out with Kane in a whimper. What was the whole point of this?
Well, okay. Well, now that you bring it up that way, I actually do have a theory on why it could be, right? You said, what's the point of her edit? Well, maybe she is the delusional 0 vote third place finisher. Maybe that's her, and maybe she goes to Final Tribal and was like, I did this, I had an idol, I did this, I had an idol. And I'm trying to think, does anybody besides Matt know that was a fake idol or no?
Unless it was off camera, to our knowledge, only Matthew knew it was fake because he made it, and he told Carson it was real. So everyone in the game believes that it was real.
Okay, so she can't even really get exposed unless people know. We don't know. She can't really even get exposed at Final Tribal for that. But like,
and by the way, just to confirm this, people asked Kane in his exit press, when did you find out it was fake? Did you find out at Ponderosa with the jury? And Kane was like, I didn't know until like long after. So only person that knew it was fake was Matthew.
Okay, so yeah, even though she won't get exposed for that at Final Tribal, she could get exposed for the. If she goes to Final Tribal and was like, I was important, I knew this, I did this, and then they're like, no, you didn't. Like, we didn't see it that way. Then I could just see her edit being like delusion. Jay brings up a point here. He goes, maybe Jamie's getting the Gabler edit. Maybe she's being made to look bad and not threatening, only for us to be shocked that she wins at the end. But it was completely different. I think her edit was completely different from Gabler's, right? Gabler's edit made theoretical sense, and we were able to see him advancing himself in the game because of what his strategy, right? Whereas Jamie, her perceived strategy that she's telling us does not match what we're watching, right? Like, do you get what I mean? Like, Gabler's, as critical as I was about Gabler, as critical as several people were about Gabler, his strategy, like what his strategy was what he did, right? We saw his strategy. What he said, he was very, very self-aware. She is not self-aware from what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously we can't predict anything anymore. We've seen that from the last few seasons because we were on record. I was on record saying I didn't think Gabler could win. We were texting each other last season. I didn't think I thought Gabler could win until the votes were being read in Final Tribal. So it's like I really can't predict anything anymore. I just feel like the Survivor never makes fun of their winners. I feel like even with Gabler, yes, he was putting the palm fronds on people. Yes, he, and Ellie got into a fight, but he did have his inspirational moments with the veterans, with him saying, I'm hiding in plain sight. Like, he was getting content where it's like, oh, Gabler's not like the Jesse, but he's trying to do certain things. They never like made fun of him. They're really just hamming up Jamie here with the whole fake stuff. And Survivor never does that with their winners. So I will say, and people can do old takes exposed, freezing cold takes, whatever you want to do. Like, I don't see a world in which Jamie wins just because they don't want to make fun of their winner And they didn't even do that to Gabler and Erica. They just didn't show Erica. But it's like, if I had to rank all 8 people left, I can't see Jamie winning. Everybody else, you can maybe tell me a story. I'll say, even like Jamie, even like Lauren, I could say like, but like everyone else, you can maybe convince me a case, and I'll say maybe. I can't see a world in which Jamie wins.
Yeah, I agree with you. We'll wait until like maybe next week, Final 7, to rank our potential winners. But I would say that at this moment, I don't see a world where anybody outside the 3 Tikas or Franny wins. So I think those 4 are the 4 to look for.
I would say I mean, we can go into it more next week, like you said, but I would say the 3 Tikas, Franny. I actually would say maybe even Heidi 5th. I feel like Danny's starting to get more of like not a villain edit, but I feel like Danny's starting to get more of a lighter villain edit in some ways. So I feel like I would say the 3 Tikas, Franny, and Heidi are my top 5. Then maybe Danny, then Lauren, and then Jamie. Like that's what I would say.
Right. Yeah. It's like Danny's getting like the played too hard too early type thing, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel for him. But you know, anything could change in Survivor, so you never know. But I was
just gonna say the one last thing I'll say about the votes before we get back into the questions is because I saw people saying on Twitter, like, you know, did Ratu do the right thing in terms of splitting the votes? Because last week with Brandon, they didn't split the votes. It kind of bit them in the ass. And this week they split the vote and it didn't work. I mean, they were going to be screwed either way because Tika was going to vote with Soka. But what Steven and Rob were saying on the know-it-alls was when you do a split vote and you're splitting with people that, like, obviously Ratu knows that they're locked in. If you're splitting with another alliance or people that you're not 100% sure about, the right way to do the splits is you put all your votes on the person you most want to go home. So what they did was they said girls, Carolyn, Jamie, Lauren, girls go on Heidi. And we saw Lauren voted twice with the extra votes. Sorry, Jamie did that, extra votes. And then Lauren on Heidi for the 3. And then we saw Kane vote for Danny because it was supposed to be Kane and the guys, Carson and Jam Jam. So that's how they did the split. It obviously fell apart. I feel like if they wanted it to work, even though it was never going to, the Ratus probably should have all put their votes on Danny. And then the Tikas all go on Heidi. Because I feel like in the end, when you do a split votes, the person you most want to leave, that's who you put your core votes on, I feel like. But
yeah, and then one other thing here. What do we figure out a reason why Franny voted for Jamie? I'm trying to think of theoretically why. Like it makes sense, like I guess I don't know. I don't know why it makes sense.
I think because obviously I mean it obviously was not to prevent
okay. I think okay, here's what it is. I think given the fact that they're shot in the dark now, I think that people are just more like not conservative. Yeah, kind of conservative with how they vote. So what I mean by that is let's just say Kane played an idol, okay? Let's say Heidi played an idol or a shot in the dark and was safe, right? Or vice versa. Let's say Heidi played an idol, Kane played a shot in the dark, he was safe, right? I think it's like, all right, well, in case disaster happens, and one of us gets a stray vote, let's tie it up and just throw one on Jamie.
So it could be that. I think what my actual theory, because I feel like shot in the dark wasn't the intention here, only because Jamie wasn't she really wasn't the target here, because I think Franny knew that Kane was going to go home at this point no matter what. My theory is they didn't know that Jamie gave Kane exactly. I think it has to do with the idol. They don't know. Right. Jamie gave Kane the idol in his pocket and he went home with it. They don't know that at this point. They probably did this to say, okay, Kane's going to go home. Jamie still has her idol. What if we throw, and granted, it could just be like a hinky vote where she just threw a vote on Jamie to scare her. Maybe she puts the vote on Jamie because then if Jamie still had her idol next week, it kind of spooked her a little bit. That convinces Jamie, people are starting to vote for me. I'll play my idol, and they just vote for Lauren instead next week. So I think it really was just a little hinky vote to spook Jamie, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I like that theory a lot. I think that makes sense. Yeah. But let's get to questions. All right, let me take a look. All right, so we got from Jay here. He says, maybe a hint at Franny's winner edit, given the fact that she's the only one who seems to see that Tika is in the middle. So I would say that's for sure possible, and certainly one of the reasons why I think that me and you, Ryan, both have her as in the top 4 for potential winners. I also think she could, she could easily. It could be that, or it could be the Franny was right and Atika wins this season, but nobody would listen to Franny's plan.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say it's almost like Franny's starting to fall into the Carolyn camp of people not taking Carolyn seriously all season. Carolyn has the right reads, and she's like, why are we going to vote for Kane? Kane's not a threat. Like, Carolyn knows the game and she has the right awareness, but no one's giving her the time of day and listening to her. Maybe we're seeing Franny get into the same situation where Franny's having really good reads, but her allies and Danny don't want to see it the same way. But Franny has more, maybe Franny's going to get more recognition because she's winning challenges. She's maybe seen as more of a player than Carolyn is. She may get more respect. So we could be seeing a situation where it's 2 trains on 2 parallel tracks where it's like they're both not given the respect or they're both not being listened to, but Franny actually gets the respect in the end when Carolyn doesn't. So that could be what's happening here. I do think Franny had the right read. Even though you want to break up Ratu, you can't ignore Tika as the most dangerous middle here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. All right. Let's see. What else do we got here? All right, so Nate 9-9 here. He says Heidi choosing who makes fire. I don't know if she has proven to be that great in challenges. I don't know if there is real evidence that she could win final immunity. I think what he was saying is that, not like a complete question, but like kind of a question is that basically in the comments here, for those who aren't watching live or who aren't replaying the comments after and are just listening, there was a conversation or a live chat about maybe Heidi being the key decision maker in several instances means that she's the one who has to choose at the end who makes fire. I'm okay with that theory. I feel like though, at least in the new era, these last few seasons, I feel like that every season there's been somebody who has been been part of a key decision, and we're like, like they're gonna be the person that chooses to make fire, and it's always like, oh well, we thought, but like I don't think so. So I don't know. It's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we can't count anybody out. It's like, obviously, we see all the time that people sometimes don't win a challenge the whole season and then they win in the end. Obviously, you think of Jeremy, but, Jeremy wasn't trying that hard. Or you think of Romeo in 42, where Romeo didn't win a single thing and then he wins in the end and takes Marianne. So, yeah, I mean, look, Heidi can easily win. I think Heidi, someone who does, I think, Peloton or CrossFit, Heidi is, pretty athletic. So she could win a challenge. The last few seasons in the new era, the final immunity challenge is either Samotion or it's the one where you move the little dishes over the track. So it's not endurance, it's not physical. It's more like a mental type of focus challenge in the end. And Heidi definitely, I think, has the focus and the mental fortitude to do it. So it would not shock me with Nate's theory, Dylan, that you're right. Heidi could, if her whole thing back to Claire has been, I have a decision to make, and that's my stories. I'm always in a spot where I'm making decisions. She could be in this Final Four decision-making seat, possibly.
Yeah, and I missed that was in response right here to Jay's comment. Yeah. He said, that's why I think Heidi will have to choose who makes fire Final Four. The edit keeps focusing on her on her making strategic choices in a way that other people don't get. And then one question we got here. From Jay also. By the way, why did the vote randomly switch onto Heidi at Tribal when her name was barely even brought up throughout the episode?
So I think the only reason why Heidi's name got brought up was because Ratu's plan again was to split the vote. So if Ratu got their way, it would have been 3 votes on Heidi, 3 votes on Danny, and then 3 votes, I guess, on Kane. And then Tika and Ratu would have come together and voted out Danny on the revotes. That's what they wanted to happen. So Heidi got 3 votes as part of the split, even though they wanted Danny to go home because Danny was Ratu's target. That's why that happened.
Yep. Perfect. And then one last question here. Final 8 in the new era has been a big blindside round. So who do you think will get blindsided big time next week? You have any predictions, Ryan?
Yeah, I think you were right at the start of the podcast. I feel like now that we've lost a couple of Ratus in a row and Brandon and Kane, They don't have their extra vote anymore. They don't even have an idol unless they find a new one. I feel like Lauren and Jamie have kind of been declawed a bit, and they're, I think, way less threatening now. So I would say Danny is in a really bad spot because he's a physical threat. He's safe for Frannie with an idol. He's being seen as a major player in the game. And if he doesn't win immunity, I think he could be in big trouble next week. If it's not Danny, I could see it being maybe Heidi to weaken Danny. I think Frannie's okay. But it would not surprise me that now that Tika's been kind of exposed a little bit by Frannie, it would not surprise me if it's one of the Tikas. I'll say if it's not Danny, I could see it being one of the Tikas, maybe like a Jam, possibly.
Yeah. So, okay. So speaking of Final 8 new era, so I'm trying to think. Last season, who was the 8?
That was Noelle. Now, obviously, Noelle is a bit of a different case because she had a really big story as well.
Right.
So it was Noelle.
And then
it was High.
Oh, that was a big vote.
And
right?
then it was Shan. So eight is usually in the new era. It's a very big spot for people to go out here.
Yeah. So that being said, I think my first choice to go next week is probably Danny, right? Because I think that ultimately, like, this is a spot where if you're going to keep the 3 Tika intact, right? The move is to move right to Ratu and work with them too, and then vote one of the Soka out. Like, that is the way that they're going to stay in next week. Mm-hmm. However, it just depends if Ratu wants to do that and vote out Ahsoka, or if Ratu says, you know what, maybe now is a good time to get rid of the Tika. I see what Franny's saying. So I'm going to say Danny is my favorite to go out as of next week, with Jam being my second potential vote out. So I think regardless, a big name will go home next week.
The only question that we have to just figure out, and I'm sure we'll know this really early on into the episode next week, is what does Ratu decide to do? Because I feel like, they're not going to, I don't think Tika and Soka are going to continue working together now that they've kind of been in the middle to that point. I feel like it's going to come down to, does Tika go to Ratu and say, all right, we took 2 of your guys out. We're sorry, but we can't let Danny and Heidi and Frannie go any farther. They're a really dangerous physical trio. They got to go. Or do we see Soka go to Ratu and say, look, can we stop the war? Tika's just going to go to the end if we let them keep sliding. They have to get out now. So Ratu might be the kingmakers next week. We could also see a situation where Ratu throws Tika under the bus, where Tika says to Ratu, okay, we voted out Brandon and Kane. We promise we're going to go vote out Danny. They run back to Lauren and Jamie run back to Danny and say, you know what Carson just said to us? That you should go out, Danny. And then they flip on Carson and Jam. So I do feel like it's going to really depend on maybe what Jamie and Lauren want to do. I feel like it's Tika or Soka.
Yeah, for sure. All right. And on that note, we will wrap up, and we will be back next week at some point. We'll have to figure out when that is. Maybe Thursday. We'll have to see. To recap episode 10. Thank you to everybody who's watching live here, even though we were, in the middle of a Saturday. Thank you to all. Reminder, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the channel, like this video, really help us out. And that's all we got for today. See you guys next week.
See you next week. Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.